How would you like to run a marathon at midnight? What about in 32-degree heat? The women marathoners at the World Athletic Championships in Doha, Qatar, had to contend with both. Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Jeff. JR is the producer. JR is still basking in the glow of his appearance on episode 200. So if you haven't heard that one and you're wondering what our famous producer sounds like, go back one episode and you can hear him. He did a nice job, right? That's our JR. Anyway, this is episode 201, so you can find all the episode resources at plainenglish.com/201. Coming up today, oh boy, running a marathon in the desert. Running a marathon without anyone to cheer you on. Sounds depressing. Running a marathon in 70% humidity. Running a marathon at midnight. Oh my goodness. Where do we begin? These were the conditions the women marathoners had to face at the World Track and Field Championships in the tiny Middle Eastern country of Qatar. We'll talk about that, and we'll talk about the phrase to come under fire, and we have a song of the week too. Before diving in, I wanted to make sure you know about our email list at plainenglish.com/mail, M-A-I-L. JR sends out an email with the episode summary. The song of the week is included. Links to extra bonus reading is included in English. And we also highlight one English phrase for you to learn, all for free, every Monday and Thursday, and it can be yours by visiting plainenglish.com/mail. It was a surreal scene in the desert. World champion and two-time Olympic gold medal winner Shelley Ann Fraser-Pryce stepped onto the track for the women's 100-meter dash at the world's biggest competition in track and field. The gun went off, she sprinted to the end, and 10.71 seconds later, she became the fastest woman in the world. Her time was the second best 100-meter time ever recorded in the world's history. She beat her opponent by a record 0.22 seconds. Doesn't sound like much to me, but in track, it's a big deal. So she won the race. She almost beat the world record. She's the fastest woman in the world, and the crowd went mild. In fact, crowd might be overstating things. Here's what happened. The IAFF is the international body that governs the sport of athletics, what we commonly call track and field. And other than the Olympics, the major event in track and field is the World Athletic Championships, which are held at a different location, different country each time. And this year, the location was Doha, Qatar. Doha is the world's richest city per capita, but it is a terrible place to hold a sporting event. Let us count the ways. First, the nation of Qatar is tiny and it doesn't have a rich tradition in sporting events like athletics or football. Second, the heat is beastly. Temperatures routinely exceed 30 degrees Celsius, and humidity is often 70% or higher. Third, Qatar is culturally very different from many countries that celebrate sports. A man can be sentenced to 40 lashes for drinking alcohol, for example. However, Qatar is looking to raise its international profile, and hosting major sporting events has been a part of this strategy. Unfortunately, its first foray into major international sports did not go well. The athletics championships were held in the 40,000-seat Khalifa International Stadium. Sounds impressive until you consider that the stadium was largely empty for most of the competitions. They covered up about half the seats, and they were still unable to fill even half of the remaining seats. Photographs of wide swaths of empty seats were such an embarrassment that event organizers passed out free tickets to migrant workers just to fill the seats and make it appear as if there were more fans in the stadium. Event winners found themselves taking a victory lap in front of their friends and family, the press, and almost no other cheering spectators. They only sold 50,000 tickets to legitimate customers for the entire week-long event. Compare this to the last championship held in London in 2017, where 660,000 tickets were sold. Now, it wasn't just the seats that were empty, the streets were too. The marathon is an event that takes place outside the stadium, usually on a picturesque route lined by cheering fans. This time, it was 6 loops of 7 kilometers, all at midnight. Few fans were watching. The temperature outside was 32 degrees Celsius in the middle of the night. 40% of the runners dropped out of the race after it started, which is not typical. The winning time was the slowest winning time for the marathon ever. One athlete said someone could have died on the course from the heat and humidity. The athletes inside the temperature-controlled stadium fared better. Yeah, you heard that right. The open-air stadium was kept at a relatively comfortable temperature. Engineers figured out a way to recirculate chilled air to keep athletes and fans comfortable. Air conditioning an outdoor stadium. Only in an oil-producing country is that possible, right? The air-conditioned stadium might be an engineering marvel, but it came at a cost. Qatar doesn't have the population to build new stadiums and infrastructure, and the oil-rich nation fills its labor shortage by importing migrant workers from abroad. Unfortunately, the working conditions for these migrants has come under fire. The migrants make very low wages and work in difficult conditions. The system used by Qatar and several neighboring countries to import labor is called the kafala system. And under this system, the sponsoring employer has a lot of control over the lives of migrant workers. In many cases, the employer can deny permission to leave the country or switch jobs. A lot of workers have claimed that they've gone unpaid, been denied water and food, and had their passports confiscated. On their 1 day off, they can move around, but places like markets and malls are designated family zones in which migrants can't enter. Workers are recruited from poor countries like Bangladesh, India, and Nepal. They're brought to Qatar to work 6 days a week in the baking heat, and much of their wages are used to pay back the fees that they had to pay to get the job in the first place. The company holds their passports and they get paid barely enough to live on when they get paid at all. They literally cannot quit their jobs and go home, all to build a stadium that was empty when they held the events. It's really sad. So to summarize, we had athletes running around a track in front of almost nobody in an air-conditioned outdoor stadium built by migrant workers under terrible working conditions that have been compared to modern-day slavery. At least the event is over, right? Not exactly. Qatar is now building, or shall I say the migrant workers in Qatar are now building or renovating 8 more stadiums around the country in preparation for, drumroll please, the World Cup in 2022. What could possibly go wrong? We'll do another episode in the next few weeks about the preparations for the World Cup, but I would have to say the situation would be comical if it weren't so sad for so many people working there on those stadiums. The marathon outside was surreal. I couldn't imagine running a marathon in the middle of the night. How do you prepare your body for that? I've run 3 marathons before, believe it or not. The first 2 were almost cheating. They were in Scranton, Pennsylvania. In fact, if you've watched the TV show The Office, the American version, it takes place in Scranton. So I ran the Steamtown Marathon in Scranton twice when I was in college. And the way that race works is it's a net drop in elevation. The area is pretty hilly, and they bus you to the starting line, and you finish in downtown Scranton, and the course is a net drop in elevation of about 300 meters. It's not technically cheating, but if you have to run a first marathon, that's a good one because it's mostly downhill. I want to say hi to a few listeners. Srikanth from Hyderabad, India is listening, hoping to improve his speech by paying attention to the grammar on plain English. Good idea, and great to have you with us, Srikanth. Miriam from Mexico is living in LA and loves it, except for the traffic. And I also want to say hi to Juan from Antioquia, Colombia, and Carlos from Rio. To come under fire is to be heavily criticized. That's our phrasal verb today, to come under fire. Here's how you heard it before. Qatar has come under fire for the working conditions of its migrant workers. That means Qatar has been heavily criticized. And we're not talking about just a couple of tweets or some angry social media posts. The international group Human Rights Watch has calculated that as many as 4,000 people will die in the construction of World Cup stadiums if past trends hold. They called it a 21st century slave state. That's pretty strong criticism. Workers say if they sustain injuries at work, their employers don't pay for medical care. The ones who are willing to talk openly say that everyone hates them for being migrant workers. Several documentaries, more than one documentary, they tell the story of migrant workers. Human rights groups and foreign media, mostly British, are heavily criticizing this whole system. So Qatar is coming under fire for this system. To come under fire literally means people are shooting guns at you. You might hear that troops came under enemy fire in a war zone. That means that the enemy was shooting at the troops. But in speech, we more commonly use to come under fire to mean to be heavily criticized. There was a trial in Dallas, a pretty high-profile trial of a police officer who shot a citizen. The officer was in the wrong and was convicted of murder. The judge sentenced the officer to prison and then gave the officer a hug and a Bible. The judge sentenced someone to prison for murder, gave that person a hug and a Bible. So now the judge is coming under fire. Was the judge truly impartial? Is it the proper role of a judge to hug a defendant? Why is a representative of our supposedly secular, non-religious government handing a Bible to someone in court? So the judge is coming under fire. She is being heavily criticized from a lot of people in the media. We've talked about the Democrats running for president here in the U.S. There are still a lot of them in the race, all hoping to be the one to face Donald Trump in the general election next fall. I told you that the leader in the polls before was Joe Biden, a former vice president. But now a senator, Elizabeth Warren, is leading in the polls. And now that she's leading, she is coming under fire from everyone else in the race. Before, Biden was the one coming under a lot of fire from the other candidates. But now that Elizabeth Warren is leading the race, she is starting to come under fire. How come? Well, easy. all the other candidates want to improve, and the best way to improve in the polls is to attack the person leading. She's coming under fire for not having a detailed health care plan. She's even coming under fire for her campaigning and debating style. She's being heavily criticized, coming under fire. But that comes with the territory in politics, right? Whoever wins this round will definitely come under some serious fire when they go up against Trump next fall. If you follow Twitter controversies, you might know that a sports executive in the United States tweeted about the protests in Hong Kong. If you were looking for the perfect example of to come under fire, you got it. This guy sent out a 1 or 2 line tweet supporting the protesters in Hong Kong, and he came under fire from players, the media, corporate sponsors, fans, and China itself. America's basketball league does a lot of business in mainland China, and the last thing they needed was to be in the middle of a political controversy. So this executive came under serious fire from all sides for his tweet. JR's Song of the Week this week is Monsters by James Blunt. The song was nominated by Anicio in Brazil. It's kind of a sad song. The singer is talking to his father who is dying, and the singer is saying that, first of all, he wants there to be peace between them, but secondly, that he, the singer, the son, is ready to take over the role of his dad in the future in their family. One of the lines is, "While you're sleeping, I'll try to make you proud." It's a good song, and I think a reflection of real life. James Blunt's father, Charles, has cancer. The song of the week on Plain English is Monsters by James Blunt, and special thanks to Anicio for nominating it. If you would like to nominate your favorite song in English, please email jr@plainenglish.com. That's all for today's episode. Thanks again for joining us at episode 201. Thanks also to JR for shuttling back and forth between places in Mexico. He's visiting his family in a small town without good internet access, so it makes it hard for him to download long audio and video files. He has to take a taxi to the nearest city and go to a cafe to get good download speeds. So he's been drinking a lot of coffee the last couple of weeks. Remember, we'll be back on Monday. The topic is musical biopics and why they're so popular all of a sudden. I'll also tell you which is my favorite, and it isn't one of the new ones. So stay tuned for that. That's coming up on Monday. Now, if you've enjoyed today's episode, then you'll love Plain English Plus. It's our new membership just for people who are serious about learning English. The thing I like best about it is the video lessons. On today's episode, the video lesson is about how to use the word ever. Monday's video lesson is going to be about how to use the expression if there were. The videos are about between 8 and 12 minutes, and they tell you step by step how to use these little parts of the English language with lots of examples and opportunities for you to create your own sentences. So this is a great way to make your speech and writing richer and more professional. So if this sounds like something you'd like, then you can sign up by visiting plainenglish.com/plus.